This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
We're so glad to have you on the show, Dave. I'm going to put you in the spot right away because we found your tagline on Twitter,
right,
which says, "Work like it's the 21st century." And we were marinating on this a little bit. And when we thought we're just going to ask you, what does that mean? What are these new rules for working? It is like it's the 21st century, or as you say, the new rules for work, the new rules of work in 2023.
Yeah. So it's funny, when I saw that, I said, oh, wow, I haven't updated that Twitter bio in a while. But it was actually in the history, I suppose, of how long I've been on Twitter. It was very recently updated. Yeah. So what does it mean in combination with this other thing that we're going to get to, this new rules for work? And what does that mean? We're still figuring it out. I think that's, we're in this liminal phase where so much is going on. Are we in the office? Are we out of the office? Are we going to have jobs tomorrow? Like all of these layoffs, what's going on with tech? What's happening with AI? What jobs is that going to replace or supplement? So the focus of our work is trying to figure out what are some consistencies, or what are some norms that we can I don't know, rely on. It's good to know the rules. We'll talk about games, but when you play a game, it's really good to know the rules so you can actually focus on how you want to play the game. And I think we're in a period right now where the rules are changing, and it's really unstable. So I did a little bit of homework, Felix, and I wrote down some things, because again, we're in the middle of this research program that we're conducting. And so, I can't say scientifically we know what the new rules for work are, but often these things are guided by our gut, right? So here's some things that come to mind when I think about the new rules for right now and how we should be working. So the first thing is experimenting. We should be experimenting, again, because we don't know what those rules are. A lot of what we're focused on with that research project is how place and technology impact creativity and innovation. So
place and technology. Okay.
Yes, place and technology. Again, should we be in the office? Should we be in the same room? Is it okay to have hybrid meetings? What exactly is hybrid? Should we be all virtual? And how do those things impact what we think of as creativity and innovation? So we're thinking of this as the why-based where. I think a lot of people are trying to answer the where, like where should we be working? And they're starting and ending with where. And you were seeing a lot of headlines of CEOs saying people back in the office, like demanding it. A lot of people are pushing back, and they say, I've really enjoyed the chance to work from home, and I can actually be more productive. Look, there's benefits to both. So why not answer other questions first, like what kind of work do we do? What do we do best in teams? What do we do best individually? When you answer those whys, then you can say where. Play and humor. This is being shown to have a huge impact. You mentioned this is a safe place, right? At the just a minute or two ago, right? You can't say it's a safe place and have it, like, you have to demonstrate that it's a safe place. One of the ways to do that is through play and humor. It generates trust, it develops vulnerability. So playing and humor are wonderful ways, not just to be productive, but to enhance creativity. Futures thinking. Yeah, I think a lot of people are familiar with design thinking, human-centered design, the double diamond of design thinking, empathy. Futures thinking is becoming, we'll say, a fast-growing or a more well-known discipline. And it's really thinking, well, I think at the basis of futures thinking is at least the acknowledgement that we're very bad at predicting the future and what's likely to happen. We have a good chance of, or tomorrow has a relatively high chance, it's very much like today, but where we're really bad is 2 years out, 3 years out, 7 years out, right? 7 to 10 years, paradigm shift, business models change. We're very bad at predicting what they are. So instead of trying to predict the future, futures thinking is trying to predict as many futures as possible, and then reflecting on how you might react individually, organizationally to those futures, regardless of the likelihood of those futures happening. That's not the point. The point is to develop adaptability in strategic robustness. And then I've got some others, but the last one I'll say is creative destruction. I think we're in a time of change, and I think we're going to have to let go of some things as we adopt and adapt to new things. And I think there's a lot of models. There's a lot of talk about innovation, how to bring new things into the world, new practices, new products. But every time we bring a new thing in, whether we acknowledge it or not, something else has to go by the wayside. We have to let go of something else. And I think we're actually really good at doing the innovation and bringing new things, but I think we're really bad at the creative destruction. We actually, this is something that we talked about when we first met, right? That speaker was talking about essentially like the S curve of a product development or a product life cycle. And I said, well, there's also the inverse of that curve that kind of creates an infinity loop instead of just the S curve. And so I think we should be really deliberate with letting go of things, especially as we're in this time of change. So I think those are some of the new mindsets or rules for the way to be approaching work.
Boom, mic drop. I'm just going to try to paraphrase. So experimenting, which helps us deal with uncertainty, play and fun, which I loved, helps to create psychological safety, empathy, futures thinking, which helps to reverse engineer or actually create a story for your team or your organization that looks beyond where we are now and helps you reverse engineer what you kind of like future map is, or your timeline even. And then the creative disruption, which is about putting that timeline into place, letting go of things and focus on innovation. So there's a 5 rules set, or five sort of like sets that you're developing. And I hear you when you say, dude, it's impossible. Like things are changing so quickly right now. How can you establish rules in a game that's constantly changing? But that's why I find it so exciting to talk to you. And before we come to your research project and how everybody here can be a part of it, I want to hone in on your gaming experience. And I think you even brought an audience question to the room here, which I always love, because this is a room filled with amazing, curious minds. So what would you like to know from everyone to get us into the topic of games for a while? So I have a question here that I'm going to ask, maybe on behalf of you. I just wasn't sure if you wanted to ask the question, but I'm going to ask it. Okay. What is your favorite game, everyone? Fatima just put it in the chat. This is the question from Dave to you all. And we also want to know, so you can rattle off names, but we want to know why you enjoy that game so much. Yeah. So we'll give you a moment to reflect on this. If Eleanor and Dan are here to give you some play and fun, just think about this for a moment. What is the favorite game that you have in your life and why?
Here, I just might add as an additional prompt, as we're so wont to do now in, we're in the ChatGPT era, and it's all about developing prompts and iterating on prompts. So I see some of these coming in, board games or poker card games, right? Try to expand what you might think of as a game. Here's what everything is a game. Literally everything, unless it's picking berries in a field and avoiding large cats that want to kill us. We made everything up. Podcasts are a game. So maybe you've stumbled on something that is a game that doesn't necessarily fit the traditional definition of a game. So
also, is it watching or playing? Can it be both?
Yeah, playing.
Yeah. Playing. Okay, playing.
Yeah, songwriting's a game. There you go. That's right.
And don't forget the why. Why is it so much fun for you? And I think poker, Adam, totally counts. Let us know why. Why do you enjoy that so much? Why is that your favorite game? Let us know in the chat. Oh man, I love this community so much. Dave, you already see that the answers rolling in from lawn mowing to the constant progress in poker. That is, of course, highly tied to your opponents. Their own rule setting in Lego, love that. To the complete zen that something like puzzles can bring to your life. We have a large array of whys here, which I love. So, Dave, why is this question so important to you? Why did you ask it?
Well, it goes back to that prompt, is because I think it's really freeing to think of everything as a game, right? I think we have a limited definition of what we think of as a game. Monopoly, right? I mean, that would probably be the most common first answer you would ask anybody. Like when what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you what a game is? Monopoly. It's been around forever, different variations. It's global. People understand it. But when you think about play, and when you think about what a game really is, if you can develop the rules for it, like I love Eleanor and Dan said songwriting, right? Because it's something that you probably wouldn't think as an answer to what's your favorite game, but there's probably rules to it. You could write those rules down, and you could probably teach somebody how to write a song. It might not be a good song, but my guess is you could write the rules down to some degree. And I think if you can do that, if there's something repetitive to it, if there's something that's inbound, if there's a game board, what's inbounds, what's out of bounds, what are the instructions? How do I know when I'm done? Are there any materials that I need? That's a game. And another, I won't say misconception, but another thing we associate with games is that there has to be a winner or a loser. There has to be a score. And that's a common element in games, but it's not necessarily one that you always need to incorporate when you're playing games at work. I think the real three elements are game board, inbounds, out of bounds, materials / supplies, and then the instructions, right? You need a goal, and then you need a set of instructions of how to play the game. And when you think that anything is a game, I think it's really freeing to know that we made this all up. We're not bound to any of these rules, should we not want to be. And so when we move into a world of play, the stakes are less, right? We can imagine a situation with our business or in our personal lives. We can represent the dynamics that are going on in those situations with tokens or with rules, and we can experiment with them, and we're free to go in lots of different directions, because while we can mimic the real world in terms of its dynamics, the stakes aren't there should we make a mistake.
Wow, I love that. It brings a certain lightness to everything, even to this room right now, I feel like. And you have developed, of course, a method based off of a book called Gamestorming, a toolkit for innovators, gamechangers, and rulebreakers, which was published in 2010 and sold over 120,000 copies. That is an amazing success. Congratulations. And
I didn't, to be clear, I didn't write the book, but
you built a company on top of it called the Gamestorming Group. And everybody who goes to your website can see you're just sharing it. You're sharing so many exercises, so many games. And what you do has become a staple for designers, for facilitators, for visual thinkers all around the world who are trying to gamify the workplace and the things that we all want to come to. Now, first of all, I want to ask you why you do that, because you, on your resume, there's all kinds of very serious stuff like director of strategy at Samsung in South Korea, and then Hewlett Packard, like huge corporate stuff, and now you're doing this. So what led you to do this? What is your why?
So yeah, the authors decided that they wanted the book essentially open source, right? So that's why all of that is there. It's a wonderful resource for people planning meetings, thinking about activities to do. So for me, I was pretty boring in a lot of respects. I still am boring. In my job back in 2010, I was a consultant, and my job was to put as much text on PowerPoint slides as possible. The only creative decision that I got to make was whether it was going to be Helvetica or Times New Roman, right? So the Helvetica was for the cool clients, the Times New Roman was for the more conservative, stodgy clients. I had an economics degree, an MBA, which is to say I didn't go to art school, didn't go to design school, never had a capital C creative position. In 2010, through an acquisition, all of a sudden I became colleagues with people who did go to art school, design school. They had capital C creative positions. It was the authors of this book. And of course, I got a copy of the book because we were the acquirers in this particular transaction. And so I don't think I would have seen the book any other way had it not been for this merger and acquisition. And so I started reading it as I was traveling to client sites on the plane. And as I was reading the book, I said, this is, why didn't they teach me these things in school? And at this point, it's 10 years after grad school, and I'm thinking like, oh, nobody really teaches you how to work, right? School doesn't teach you how to work. You show up, whether it's in person, if people still do that, or on Zooms, you read people's emails, you see their presentations, you watch how they conduct a meeting, and then you do those things. You copy it because, oh, that's acceptable to do at this place. Culture is very important. And yeah, then I realized nobody teaches you how to work. And I got pretty lucky that I had this chance transaction where I got to see, it was very aspirational for me to see, well, I'm reading this book, but then I could look up and I could see the people who wrote the book doing the thing that I was just reading about in a conference room or with clients. And so it made a huge impact on my professional life. And even personally, it's more of a way of thinking, and it would be hard to not bleed over from one into the other, personal life into professional life, or vice versa. And so I just started devouring it. I started hanging out with as many people who I thought could teach me about this as possible, and then I just used it in all of my professional roles. And then, so you mentioned I was in Korea when I came back stateside from Korea, and then this opportunity came up back to work again with the authors again, and make a business out of teaching people how to do this. And one, it was a continuation of an adventure mindset. Like I just come back from working overseas, and it felt like, oh, here I am. I'm kind of back where I started, kind of boring. As I didn't want a 9-to-5 job. So I said, oh, this seems like a really great opportunity. But then also I just felt really passionate, mission driven about teaching people how to do what I had learned. Because I felt like I had an inside seat to some pretty heavyweight creatives. And even they didn't know what they were doing. Like I kind of came in with a foot in, I always thought of myself as little c creative. I always wanted to be creative. I thought I came up with pretty cool formulas and Excel spreadsheets. But then I also did have that analytical side so that I could see, there's some people who just have instinct and confidence and gut feel, and they just do it, and they don't even know what they're doing. Right. But I could look back and say, oh, songwriting. Like some people I was just watching a clip where, Metallica was on Howard Stern, and they were explaining how they came up with the Sandman riff. And it's the guitarist Kurt Hammett said at 3 a.m. It came to me. And some people have that, right? Other people have much more structure to their creative process, and so that was me. Like that.
Right.
I structure things, and like you again look back up here. There's lots of lines and boxes in matrices.
And I was going to come to that, because on gamestorming.com, and I can only invite everyone to go to that website and spend time there, because it is a treasure trove. The book is open source, so you can just go to categories on the right side, and you see games for any meeting, games for decision making, games for fresh thinking, games for planning, games for team building. It's there. Everything is there. But is there maybe one game or one template, Dave, that you use maybe even every day in your own work life?
Well, look, the thing I'll say that I think is worth doing consistently, because I think to answer a question like that, it's so situational, right? The thing that I'll say, and it's something that I've noticed from all of the creative people that I've been around, is they have a pen in their hand, a pencil in their hand. That's been my observation. They journal, they sketch. Again, this is not a universal law. This has been my experience, but they record everything. Whatever it is, they're recording it, and they go back to it later. Very much like this, but digitally as well as analog. But they draw, they sketch, they doodle, and so that is something that I would say it's not just a game to play, but I brought up a quote here from Dr. Andrew Huberman. Maybe you know him. He's the Stanford professor of neuroscience. He's come on the scene in like the last year or so, super popular podcast. But he just, so this is a quote from his Instagram account. The value of writing by hand cannot be overstated. When we read or listen to something and then write down key takeaways by hand, and it says not by typing, it engages motor circuits in ways that deeply embed information to memory. Writing by hand, however cursory, is the best way to recall information. And he's got other promises of future podcasts and things, but that's it just opens up so many pathways. Again, it's one of those things that I think when you do it, you realize there's benefits to it, but now there's more science coming out and saying, yeah, actually having a pen or pencil in your hand is really beneficial for recall and learning, but also I would say creativity as well.
Fantastic. Now, thank you for sharing that. And I just shared the podcast in the chat here, humanmanlab.com, for everybody who wants to check out more from the man who brought that quote to life, which I think is fascinating, especially to me, because I record a lot, but it's all electronically by now. And I see a lot of people around me not doing that. And I will always wonder what's the right way. So thanks for bringing the physical writing, doodling back to this room. And there's something else that I wanted to talk to you about today. And we said in the beginning, and it fascinated me from the moment I talked to you for the first time, which was just a few months ago. Shout out to Greg Larkin. I recommend everyone to follow his LinkedIn musings, who brought us together. You said that you have been looking into what we have now gotten to know as the Zoom fatigue research.
Yeah.
And myself, and I guess also the Remote Daily, community and team, I don't think we have really experienced a lot of Zoom fatigue when we're together here, but we all know the sort of like emptiness, or the sort of being easily distractedness, and the sort of maybe even disappointment that comes in a lot of virtual experiences we all have experienced over the last 3 years, especially. I always say there's no Zoom fatigue. It's just a tool that we have to learn how to use. But of course, I'm also blowing my own horn. I'm biased because this is where I live and where I spent most of my days. There's other people who say the opposite. And in the middle of that discussion, I think somewhere in 2020, 2021, this study pops up and says, for once and for all, Zoom kills creativity. And of course, when that came up first, I read it. I read all about it because I thought, this really? I have experienced the opposite. And when I read the whole, I should say the, short version of the study for the first time, as it was told on major media platforms, I thought, this is kind of weird how they put this together. I'm not sure. And then fast forward 1.5 years, I meet you. And you tell me, I had the same reaction, but then I started to say, okay, I'm going to put together a research project that proves that the study is maybe not really accurate, or it doesn't show the whole picture.
Right.
So when I heard that from you, I was like, oh my God, you hold a key to a door that many of us have been trying to open. And I'm so fascinated by what you're doing here. And you have done a lot since. You have tried to better understand the science. You have launched a study. You have held a symposium just a few weeks ago to bring together researchers and leaders to talk about this. Where are you right now? Like, what is going on this day in April 2023 in terms of your way of the counter argument to Zoom fatigue?
So first of all, most meetings are shit. And when they are and they're online, then we say Zoom fatigue. But there's I don't know if it's millions or billions, multi-million-dollar industries and that is trying to address poor meetings, right? So that's foundationally the problem here. And there's simple things you can do to improve your meetings. Now, when we translate that online, of course, it's incorporating new facets to why meetings aren't so great. The tech, of course, it seemed to amplify some of the things that go wrong in meetings. And a lot of meetings turned into webinars essentially, and webinars can be really, really boring. And then, the other thing that happens quite a bit with Zoom is you're looking at yourself, and you're looking at yourself quite a bit, and then you're also looking at other people, and you're trying to get signal from other people digitally that you get in the room, and you're trying to read their body language, and you can't connect. It's kind of like your cell phone trying to connect to a tower, and that actually drains the battery quite a bit when it can't get a signal. So yeah, there was a researcher, Melanie Brooks at Columbia. She was really interested about this, and she ended up publishing that. It was almost about a year ago. Yeah. And it said, you recapped it beautifully. I don't know that I had a huge problem at the time anyway with the conclusion, which was, if you want to be more creative, if you want to be more collaborative, get in a physical room in the same place together. But then as I started reading the survey, I went into the methodology, and that's where I had the problem, is because what the study used for its methodology was pairing coworkers off, whether to go in a room together or to get on other ends of a Zoom call. And the prompt was, well, okay, let me back up. Before they even did that, there was an hour lecture on creativity. There was a second hour lecture on this program their company was developing, which was kind of a cover for the research that they were conducting, because they didn't want these people to be aware that they were in a research project. So there were 2 hours worth of lecture. Then they paired employees off and gave them 45 minutes to brainstorm creative uses for either bubble wrap or a Frisbee. And that's the number of responses they created, and their perceived creative qualities that were evaluated as part of that third hour were how they gauged creativity. And I thought, you're putting people to sleep with 2 hours of lecture before then asking them to be creative. It's like putting Usain Bolt in a box that is too small for his body and then opening it up and say, set the world record for the 100 meter. It's not going to happen. So going back to all of the things we've talked about up to now, drawing, extended mind, right? We primed with our meditation. There's all kinds of things that you can do that we know that are best practice, that people who actually have stakes, employees at companies whose meetings actually have consequences, and they have to develop the next product feature, they have to innovate. None of that was represented in this study. So we said, look, I think we can do well. I made a LinkedIn post about it, and then I wrote about it to the newsletter, and complaining and calling it trash. I called it I called the study trash. I called the headlines clickbaity trash, and I said this study belongs in the trash.
And it was published in Nature. I mean, I just shared the link in the chat.
Yes.
This is not, it was not on some side channel somewhere.
No. Nature's pretty reputable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but to be fair also to Nature and Melanie, it was more nuanced. It was the day after, when the business press picked it up, that it was the hyperbolic headlines, right?
Okay.
But nonetheless, we had our spark. And so it was really just in writing to the newsletter that actually somebody came back and said, hey, Dave, instead of complaining about this, why don't we do something about it? And she proposed, and we've been collaborating on this 4-part research. So you mentioned, yes, the first part of that was the symposium, and that happened in January. And we brought together people who study creativity, who both on the academic side, but also practitioners, expert facilitators, people who are studying the neuroscience of teaming, high-performing teams. And we said, all right, we want 3 days. We just want to share what do we currently know about collaboration, space, location, technology, creativity. Then second phase, we said we're going to perform an experiment, which is we're going to run a meeting as many times as we can, essentially to counter the Frisbee and bubble wrap question. We want to run our own version of the meeting. But what's the agenda going to be? So we actually created an open competition for people to submit 90-minute. Well, now we're down to, we've shaved it down to 60 minutes, but it's a 60-minute meeting that we can run to come with a creative output. And so that was phase 2, where we selected actually 2 agendas, 60-minute agendas. And now we're back in a planning phase. And so we are currently waiting for approval from an IRB, an institutional review board, which I'd never heard of, but our academic advisors said, look, if we want to get this published in something the equivalent of a Nature, we've got to go through all of the proper channels and make sure everybody who administers this meeting is who is certified to be able to do this ethically and morally, because there's been some problems with controversial research decades ago, but nonetheless, we still have our standards, and we have to make sure this is done in an ethical, moral way. But we're also gathering participants. We need people, we need teams to raise their hand and say, I'd be willing for my team of 12 to 36 people, or my company, come at Dave. And my co-host, co-producer on this, Elise Keith of Lucid Meetings, would you come in and conduct this meeting for lots of my teams, right? We need reps, we need experiment data. So we're currently in the phase of collecting those names and scheduling the runs of the meeting. And they're gonna be recorded, so we can code them and make insights from the experiment.
So this is pretty serious. You went from a LinkedIn post bashing a study to putting together a team, creating a huge event, and creating a counter approach study with actual meeting agendas that you're now taking into organizations. And this, I think, is the point, is where we can actually support you, because I think that you're currently really looking for teams all over the world to join the study. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. We're looking, if you are a facilitator, you're interested in facilitating this meeting, we will train you and you can facilitate it with your team, with your clients, whoever it is. If you are an organization and you're curious to know, maybe you're putting together a return to office policy and you want to know what are the benefits, or how are your people working virtually, in hybrid or in the office, we'd be happy to come in and conduct this meeting 5, 10, 20 times with your people, debrief you on the results, as well as share with you the larger pool. And we also need like a general population type of registry. So especially in a virtual setting, we'll take a collection of individuals who have volunteered and we'll run this meeting with them. The topic is going to be we'll call it a for good, an ESG, UN Sustainable Development Goal related type of topic. So for example, this is not one of them because of course I don't want to taint the experiment data, but how might we reduce waste in the takeout in delivery industry? That would be an example of a topic that we would address in one of these meetings. So it's something hopefully universal and global so that we can get as many participants as possible. So for that, and I saw you put links, newrulesforwork.com. That's where you can go and you can learn about the experiment. You can register your team. You can get in touch with us. It's newrulesforwork.com.
And Kyoko, I already saw giving a thumb up. Also, Anne, I think there's many of us here in the community interested. We also have a link from you, Dave, that is starts with Gamestorming research.typeform. So I think it's a form that people can use to type in. So Fatima is now going to share that in the chat for you, so you can directly use that form to either fill it out yourself or forward it to friends, colleagues, or even share it in groups that you're a part of. Because I think this is a purpose well worth supporting and undertaking. Are there any limits, Dave, to team sizes or to any sort of no's that you can share up front?
We're looking for teams of 12 to 36 is going to be, that's kind of, that fits in like your standard meeting range, of course. And it take about 90 minutes, which includes survey, briefing on the topic, that's 15 minutes, meeting agenda is 60 minutes, and then follow on survey for 15 minutes. So it's going to be a 90-minute commitment for your team of 12 to 36 people. We can do it as many times as you can supply us with fresh participants. And the more people we have, the more times we run the study. If we get enough teams, we'll start bringing AI in. Like, what does AI do to creativity, right? Because that's something that came up so recently, and we were talking to our advisory board. How do we incorporate this? And it's kind of because of the institutional review board, we're kind of past the point of no return with some of these things. But the more data points we get, the more we can begin to look at other aspects of what technology means. But right now, we're really looking at Zoom and different cameras and microphones and screen setups in rooms. So
fantastic.
Yeah,
this is also going to, of course, impact Remote Daily, and we have been playing around with it. It's fascinating what's coming to the meetings in the future from AI-generated, of course, highlights and notes. And, the scribbling, again, is being taken out of our hands and being put into the hands of large-scale learning models. But it's super interesting what you have been and what you're brewing there, Dave, is so fascinating. I'm so glad that we get a chance to share this with you today, with you all out there. So if you're listening on the streams right now and you can't see the long link in the chat, it's newrulesforwork.com. This is where you can get access to Dave's work and be a part of it. And I highly encourage you all, if you have access or even know someone who has team sizes between 12 to 36 people and want to give 90 minutes to, I think, a better future of work, please do so. Last question for you, Dave. For anyone right now who is sick of meetings, you said in the beginning, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest problems in the workplace to this day is A, people feel treated unfairly, and B, people don't actually enjoy the day-to-day experience of working, especially in knowledge work, of being on meetings. Is there just anything you can share with us, like any advice that, for everyone who's listening right now and says, yeah, but I need to solve this tomorrow. Like I already know I have a bad meeting coming up tomorrow. Right. I'm so sick of it. What can we all do to do things a little bit better tomorrow?
So I'll give you something that one of our academic advisors, his name is Joseph Allen. He's at the University of Utah. There's 5 things that he says, and these apply to almost all meetings. Start on time, end on time. Have some humor and or play, limit the monologuers, and make sure everybody is heard, right? So those 5 things that you can do not the only 5 things, but 5 things you can do to have a good meeting. I'm going to say do work in the meeting. Especially now, and this is one of those things that being online is amplified, is nobody wants to go into the meeting, that webinar style of meeting. Send the content ahead of time, let people read, consume, whatever it is they need to do. And in the meeting, do the work, have the discussion to make the decision. Or if you're going to explore something, a lot of what we do and a lot of what we teach people to do is to actually create and collaborate. So Zoom goes to the side and you're in, I don't know what it is, a Google Doc, a Teams space, Miro or Mural or Storms. So try to make and then the time goes by, people are engaged, and I promise you won't have the Zoom fatigue when you move the screens to the side, or the camera and the images to the side, and you're actually doing work.
I was going to ask you as well, and Daniel just repeated in the chat. Would you mind rattling off these 5 things just once more for us?
Right. So start and stop on time. 2, some degree of play and or humor, right? Try to incorporate humor, make a joke. Make sure everybody is heard, right? So not just, think about hybrid too, right? A lot of times the hybrid participants, the people who are remote, feel like outsiders in their own meeting. And then limit the monologuers, no monologuers, right? So, and that's where the webinar version of a meeting comes in. Fantastic. Is when it's right. And that's a game. That's actually the game that Gamestorming came from, is that meeting with nobody sends an agenda. The right people are maybe in the room or maybe they're not there. 1 or 2 people talk. Nobody takes any action items, and then there's no follow-up and no decisions were made. So those are all the flip sides of those 5 good things that you can do to make better.
Dave, you're amazing. I'm so glad we could have you on the show today. I want to stop on time. So Dave, your final message for all of us, what would you like to leave us with today before we say goodbye?
Extend your mind. Extend your mind with Post-it notes, with pencils, with index cards, draw and doodle.
Fantastic. For now, I want to say goodbye and wish you a restful and healthy weekend, and start and stop on time, do the work in the meetings, and support our amazing guest, Dave Mastronardi. Bye-bye. Thank you, Dave.
This is remote day.